Rosie O'Donnell ditching the U.S. for Ireland in the wake of Trump's victory, and the president is responding. Watch it.
Rosie O'Donnell's long-standing public animosity toward newly elected President Donald Trump escalated in an explosive moment that captured the nation's attention. In a broadcast that spread like wildfire across social media, O'Donnell asserted that the new president's marriage to First Lady Melania Trump was in jeopardy due to alleged infidelities. This incendiary on-air allegation took many by surprise, igniting a storm of chatter among pundits, commentators, and ordinary citizens alike. The back and forth between O'Donnell and Trump had been brewing for years, but few anticipated an accusation of this magnitude, much less a focused critique on the state of the president's personal life. The resulting speculation and discussion became a national phenomenon that created a tidal wave of opinion pieces, talk show segments, and endless online debates about the state of the first couple's relationship. The matter drew curiosity, concern, and in some corners, unrestrained schadenfreude as people dissected every gesture, word, and gesture again, searching for proof of marital discord. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The feud between Trump and O'Donnell had been a defining feature of their public personas for quite some time, though it generally remained confined to snarky jabs and comedic monologues. That dynamic changed when Trump ascended to the presidency, effectively repositioning both the power and the stakes. O'Donnell's commentary acquired greater visibility because it was suddenly directed at the occupant of the highest office in the land. Rather than being dismissed as a personality-driven squabble, the contention took on broader meaning for those following the new president's every move. When O'Donnell stepped onto the set of a popular talk show to deliver a pointed critique of Trump's personal behavior, the tension that had simmered for so long erupted into a conflagration. The audience reaction was electric. The subject was not simply the president's policies or public persona, but rather the deeply personal matter of his marriage, and O'Donnell was not holding back. There was a collective intake of breath when she made her claims, for they suggested a fractured union at the very top of the nation's political sphere. The possibility that Donald Trump was embroiled in secret affairs, whispered about behind the closed doors of the White House, captivated the imagination of viewers. Even the talk show hosts, typically prepared for any shocking soundbite, seemed momentarily taken aback by the fervor in O'Donnell's tone. Observers noted the intensity of her words, her unwavering gaze, and the way she refused to temper her statements with ambiguity. She delivered her perspective with the confidence of someone who believes the president's personal failings were a matter of public interest. This directness, while exhilarating to some, struck others as an invasion of privacy. But there was no going back. The accusation was on the table, and it set off a chain reaction of rumors, discussions, and heated debates. Commentators wondered how this development would impact Melania Trump. In public appearances, she had often chosen to maintain a certain reserve, speaking rarely and focusing primarily on ceremonial or philanthropic tasks. Many speculated about how she would respond to such pointed attacks on her marriage. Melania was, for many observers, an enigmatic figure in the White House, often overshadowed by the more outspoken members of the administration. O'Donnell's accusation forced a brighter spotlight onto the First Lady's private life, compelling people to ask, was there any evidence of trouble between her and the new president? Did she seem unhappy or distant in her appearances? The conversation shifted from policy and election results to the question of how two individuals under intense political scrutiny managed to maintain their partnership. Online platforms were flooded with speculation, each piece trying to interpret the slightest gesture or glance as indicative of heartbreak or betrayal. Much of the public fascination stemmed from the history of conflict between Rosie O'Donnell and Donald Trump. They had traded personal insults repeatedly over the years. Many had grown accustomed to their quarrel, but had not foreseen it escalating into claims about the demise of a marriage that had officially placed a new First Lady in the White House. The shift from comedic insult to severe allegations about infidelity felt jarring. Not only did it target Trump personally, but it also dragged Melania Trump into a maelstrom she might otherwise have avoided. Audiences were torn between seeing O'Donnell's statement as an extension of her comedic persona or interpreting it as a significant revelation, albeit unverified, about a key figure in American politics. late-night commentators seized the moment, delivering extended monologues picking apart every facet of the accusation and analyzing the possible strains on the first couple's relationship. The spark that set off the storm was the direct nature of O'Donnell's claim. She insisted that Trump had been unfaithful, even while he and Melania were supposed to be presenting a united front on the international stage. The talk show on which O'Donnell appeared was not known for diplomatic restraint, so the environment amplified her message. Her demeanor suggested she believed she was doing the public a service by bringing light to this alleged misconduct. There was an undercurrent of righteous indignation in her tone, as if revealing what she believed to be the truth about the president was a moral imperative. Viewers and commentators scrambled to figure out how to parse her statements, given her history with Trump. Some believed she had nothing to gain by lying, and that her long-standing feud gave her a particularly keen interest in exposing his flaws. Others argued that her previous clashes made her a questionable source for unbiased information. The clamor around this event led media outlets to replay the segment repeatedly, dissecting each portion of O'Donnell's on-air discourse. Though many decided not to show explicit clips of her statements once it became clear how incendiary they were. Still, the public had already latched onto the allegations, and theories multiplied. People wondered if any reliable insider or credible journalist might confirm O'Donnell's claims. Few stepped forward, but that did nothing to stop the endless churn of speculation. The on-screen moment became a catalyst for broad debates about boundaries in public discourse. Some insisted that an individual's private life should remain off-limits, even for a public figure who stepped into the presidential spotlight. Others contended that if the president's decisions could be compromised by personal entanglements, the public deserved to know every detail. The controversy underscored a cultural shift in how the private sphere of famous individuals, even those in positions of power, was increasingly viewed as fair game. In the days that followed, the media continued to focus on the potential fissures in the marriage. Even simple gestures by Melania were subjected to widespread scrutiny. If she appeared without her wedding ring in a photograph, an entire wave of articles and online discussions would erupt, claiming that O'Donnell must have been correct. If she seemed quiet or distant during a public event, people assumed the worst and connected it back to the affair rumors. The narrative, fueled by O'Donnell's polarizing persona, became a near-constant presence in the news cycle. Cable talk shows gathered their usual panels of pundits to debate the validity of the allegations, turning the president's personal life into a spectacle. Citizens accustomed to political controversies involving policy or governance found themselves caught up in a scandal reminiscent of old Hollywood gossip. News crawls constantly featured updates, and the topic trended for an extended period on social media. Beyond the immediate intrigue was the question of how these claims might affect the credibility and authority of the new president. For critics of Donald Trump, O'Donnell's allegations served as a rallying cry. They believed these rumors confirmed pre-existing suspicions about the president's character. For his supporters, it was seen as another example of a relentless attempt to undermine him. The national conversation shifted from mere speculation about extramarital affairs to broader concerns about integrity, morality, and the potential vulnerability of a president to blackmail or scandal. Conspiracies abounded, some positing that the revelation of an affair could compromise his standing on the global stage, while others argued that any attempt to discredit Trump only emboldened him further. The swirling tide of talk encompassed everything from moral judgments to purely strategic political calculations. One reason Rosie O'Donnell's words struck such a chord was the knowledge that her feud with Trump had never been purely comedic. Over the years, they had exchanged personal barbs that suggested each felt deeply antagonistic toward the other. For many observers, the question was whether O'Donnell would have made such accusations without a personal motive. She had criticized Trump on countless occasions, but never before had she explicitly singled out his marriage with such severity. The leap in intensity moved the matter from personal animosity into new territory where the outcome could have lasting implications for how Trump's presidency was perceived, at least on a personal and moral level. Some wondered if O'Donnell felt it necessary to escalate her long-standing dispute out of frustration or a sense that the public needed to see the president's alleged hypocrisy on full display. Melania's public persona remained as poised as ever, though observers insisted on identifying cracks in her composure. Every appearance of the First Lady became an event analyzed through the lens of O'Donnell's accusation. Some noted a stiffness in her body language, while others claimed she seemed extra vigilant when near her husband. Every slight physical distance or small scowl was amplified into evidence that the marriage was in dire straits. The First Lady's involvement in official duties, like welcoming guests to the White House or championing her chosen causes, became overshadowed by speculation about whether she felt betrayed. The tension in the air was palpable whenever the two were seen together. The swirl of gossip overshadowed discussions of policy, philanthropy, and other aspects of White House life, focusing public attention on the intangible question of whether trust still existed between Donald and Melania Trump. Meanwhile, the comedic circuit had a field day with O'Donnell's claims. Late-night hosts, satirists, and online content creators wove jokes and sketches around the idea that the most-watched marriage in America might be on the verge of collapsing. Even those who felt uncomfortable delving into someone's marital issues found it difficult to resist the inherent spectacle of such an accusation. The comedic routines often speculated about what it would look like if Melania confronted her husband, or how Trump might react privately to Rosie O'Donnell's remarks. While these sketches drew laughter and applause, they further normalized a culture in which personal relationships at the highest levels of government could become fodder for public consumption. At the same time, many asked whether too much attention was being placed on the president's private life, overshadowing significant policy debates. Commentators who appreciated O'Donnell's sharp wit in the past began to wonder if her approach this time had gone too far. They debated whether she should have kept her suspicions to herself or raised them through channels that involved investigation or verification. Others praised her courage, arguing that the entire premise of an unfaithful president was a legitimate topic for national discussion, especially if it spoke to a pattern of behavior. The fervor around these points exemplified broader cultural battles about the boundaries of celebrity influence, the role of morality in politics, and the extent to which personal relationships matter to the voting public. Whether or not O'Donnell's claims were substantiated, she had effectively shifted the discourse in a way that no one, including the president, could easily ignore. Observers who tried to maintain a more neutral stance found themselves swamped by the outpouring of strong opinions. The sensational nature of a threatened presidential marriage was too significant for the media to overlook or downplay. The entire affair was, in many ways, a modern reflection of how politics and celebrity culture intersect. The lines separating personal and public spheres had blurred, and the actions of a figure like Rosie O'Donnell had the power to dominate discourse nationwide. This phenomenon also underscored how any personality with a platform could significantly influence collective perceptions. While O'Donnell was not an elected official, her stardom and lengthy conflict with Trump provided her with a unique kind of influence. The event turned into a cultural flashpoint that redefined, at least temporarily, how Americans engaged with political figures. Friends and associates of Rosie O'Donnell were inevitably questioned about her motives. Some insisted that she sincerely believed it was her duty to expose the truth, while others acknowledged her deep-seated anger toward Trump as a likely factor. The public was left to decide whether to interpret her actions as righteous whistleblowing or a personal vendetta disguised as a moral crusade. The nuance here, of course, was that a president's personal life can be judged differently than that of a private individual. When someone holds the highest office in the land, many argue that every aspect of their behavior carries weight and, by extension, public interest. O'Donnell's assertions about Trump's extramarital affairs, if accurate, would signal a moral failing in the leader of the nation, one that could potentially have broader implications for trust and national image. In the White House, the atmosphere appeared strained, at least through the media's lens. Staffers found themselves deflecting personal questions, hoping to shift attention toward policy achievements or upcoming initiatives. However, the shadow cast by O'Donnell's allegations did not dissipate. Reporters at press briefings occasionally ventured questions about the marriage, and though the official responses were dismissive or vague, they did little to quell the chatter. The president was scrutinized for signs of anger or defensiveness, while the First Lady was watched for any sign of distress. The swirl of speculation placed them both under an unrelenting glare that few couples in public life ever faced to such an intense degree. The spectacle overshadowed policy announcements, overshadowed the usual controversies that attend any new administration, and overshadowed almost everything else going on in the realm of governance. One of the most significant aspects of the commotion was the way it galvanized a portion of the public who already suspected the president of harboring secrets. O'Donnell's claims fit neatly into an existing narrative held by some about Trump's private dealings. For those who admired Rosie O'Donnell, her new revelations reaffirmed their belief in her candor. They saw her as an outspoken critic unafraid to call attention to what she perceived as wrongdoing. For those who opposed her views, her remarks were a case of malicious intent, gossip mongering, or even slander. Because this was not a judicial matter but rather a public one playing out in the court of opinion, there was no definitive way to prove or disprove the allegations swiftly. The result was a discursive quagmire that clouded rational discussion. Melania Trump's position became a particular focus for many commentators who recognized the double bind she might face. If she publicly defended her husband, some would perceive it as denial or willful ignorance. If she offered no defense at all, her silence might be taken as an admission of truth. The demands of the public in such situations can be contradictory, creating a no-win scenario for someone in the First Lady's position. The entire narrative turned into a reflection of the complicated power dynamics at play when a private relationship is forced into the harshest of spotlights. People empathized with her predicament, even if they disapproved of the administration's policies, because the emotional toll of such allegations can be profound. Meanwhile, Trump's supporters rallied around him, many claiming that O'Donnell was simply capitalizing on her media presence to strike a blow at a political rival she had always loathed. They argued that if real evidence existed, it would have surfaced through more official channels or credible journalists. In this view, O'Donnell was maliciously fanning the flames of scandal for personal gain or attention. Some went so far as to allege a conspiracy in which Trump's enemies in the entertainment world were uniting to tarnish his presidency from the outset. Such theories, though unsubstantiated, demonstrated how an event of this magnitude could become a canvas onto which any number of pre-existing biases and beliefs were projected. The scale of the uproar underscored a deeper truth about America's relationship with fame and political power. The president was, in effect, the country's most prominent reality star, having come to the nation's attention through business ventures and television before his foray into politics. Rosie O'Donnell was also a high-profile celebrity with decades of visibility, comedic acclaim, and a brand built on unabashed candidness. When these two forces collided over something as personal as a marriage, it fused the political world with the entertainment realm in a way that few controversies had before. The intense fascination validated a culture in which such battles were not only newsworthy, but practically impossible to ignore. The swirl of allegations eventually grew so loud that other national figures were asked their opinions. Politicians, celebrities, and social media influencers weighed in on whether they believed O'Donnell. Because of the historically fractious relationship between her and Trump, the question of motive was repeated time and again. Some individuals claimed that O'Donnell was motivated by a righteous desire to reveal the truth about a man she deemed unfit for office. Others hypothesized she was purely driven by a thirst for vengeance. Still others believed the entire scandal was less about facts and more about the grand spectacle of personality clashes. The debate was not confined to the usual political commentators. It spread into broader society, leading to discussions about whether a private matter, no matter how unsavory, should overshadow pressing political issues. While O'Donnell's statements rocked the national conversation, they also reignited perennial debates about the boundaries between public need to know and private family matters. Generally, American culture has displayed an avid interest in the personal lives of its leaders, but the question arises whether some aspects should remain private for the sake of common decency or national dignity. Even some who held critical opinions of Trump wrestled with the notion that a direct assault on his marriage might be a step too far. The president, for his part, had built a public persona as a brash and outspoken figure, so perhaps it wasn't surprising that critics like O'Donnell felt emboldened to respond in kind. But the magnitude of accusing someone of multiple affairs, while they were effectively the face of American government, raised new ethical concerns. A notable impact of the controversy was how it shaped public discussions around Melania's role. Some believed that, if indeed there were marital issues, she was thrust into an impossible situation. They wondered how that might affect her sense of autonomy, her willingness to engage with official duties, and her overall emotional well-being. Although traditionally the public has extended a measure of privacy to First Ladies, this particular scenario made that far more difficult. People who had not paid much attention to Melania before found themselves poring over past interviews and appearances, looking for any sign that she might have been foreshadowing trouble in the marriage. In effect, her entire record in the public eye was re-examined with a retroactive lens, turning mundane statements into potential glimpses of heartbreak. Beyond the personal dimension, some commentators speculated that if the accusations were true, Trump's position could be compromised. They argued that personal indiscretions might leave him open to manipulation or threats, depending on who knew about them. Even unproven allegations, if widely believed, could reduce confidence in the presidency or stir up additional controversies. Indeed, in the realm of politics, perception can be just as potent as reality. The swirling speculation thrust a sense of uncertainty into the administration's early days, making it more challenging for them to establish a unified front. In that sense, O'Donnell's accusations, valid or not, had already inflicted damage simply by occupying so much public bandwidth and sowing doubt among some segments of the population. Though many ordinary citizens dismissed the gossip as inconsequential, the sheer volume of coverage made it nearly impossible to ignore. People who typically avoided political news found themselves bombarded with coverage on entertainment channels, social media platforms, and mainstream outlets alike. The sheer scale of the scandal signaled that the personal side of politics had reached a new zenith. The debate ceased to revolve around tax policy or foreign relations, focusing instead on whether a famous comedian had single-handedly driven a wedge into the marriage of the most powerful couple in America. Beyond the personal dimension, some commentators speculated that if the accusations were true, Trump's position could be compromised. They argued that personal indiscretions might leave him open to manipulation or threats, depending on who knew about them. Even unproven allegations, if widely believed, could reduce confidence in the presidency or stir up additional controversies. Indeed, in the realm of politics, perception can be just as potent as reality. The swirling speculation thrust a sense of uncertainty into the administration's early days, making it more challenging for them to establish a unified front. In that sense, O'Donnell's accusations, valid or not, had already inflicted damage simply by occupying so much public bandwidth and sowing doubt among some segments of the population. Though many ordinary citizens dismissed the gossip as inconsequential, the sheer volume of coverage made it nearly impossible to ignore. People who typically avoided political news found themselves bombarded with coverage on entertainment channels, social media platforms, and mainstream outlets alike. The sheer scale of the scandal signaled that the personal side of politics had reached a new zenith. The debate ceased to revolve around tax policy or foreign relations, focusing instead on whether a famous comedian had single-handedly driven a wedge into the marriage of the most powerful couple in America. Observers marveled at how quickly a single televised moment could overshadow more pressing matters and become a topic of national obsession. Rosie O'Donnell, for her part, found herself in the eye of a media hurricane. Her profile surged in this period, with supporters praising her audacity and critics lambasting her for what they saw as an opportunistic or vengeful stunt. Journalists clamored for follow-up interviews, although she largely stuck to the same lines. The spectacle elevated the feud between her and Trump to new heights, transforming it from an entertainment world rivalry into a potential existential threat to the first family's bond. Political scientists and media scholars studied the event as a case of modern celebrity culture's power to influence the national conversation, raising questions about whether individuals outside of government should wield such influence over public discourse when it concerns the president's private life. Much of the national conversation eventually coalesced around a set of dilemmas that went beyond the immediate scandal. At what point does scrutiny of a leader's personal life serve the public interest? And at what point does it become mere voyeurism? Is it acceptable for a media figure with a personal vendetta to unleash allegations of infidelity with no tangible proof made public? Should a president's spouse be held up to such unrelenting analysis for non-policy reasons? These were questions sparked by O'Donnell's statements, even as they led the headlines for days on end. Critics of the media frenzy pointed out that the affair overshadowed pressing policy issues that had real-life consequences for millions of Americans. Supporters argued that the character and personal decisions of the president reflected how he might handle or mishandle the responsibilities of his office. Throughout the tumult, Donald and Melania Trump still appeared at scheduled events, albeit with an increased level of scrutiny. Every wave, every handshake, every small smile was parsed as a potential clue about the real state of their marriage. Photos of them walking across the White House lawn were magnified and analyzed in minute detail. Whole columns were written about whether they had made eye contact or seemed physically close. The spectacle shone a harsh light on what it means to be a public couple in the modern age, where every move is documented and dissected. In some ways, it was a cautionary tale about how quickly rumors and personal vendettas can overshadow the official agenda. Yet the public appetite for such stories seemed insatiable, fueling an endless cycle of rumor, analysis, and reaction. As the conversation swirled, the overarching theme remained Rosie O'Donnell's dramatic statement, which continued to reverberate across the media landscape. The initial shock had not entirely worn off, and the question of its truth lingered in the background. Some believed the details would one day be unearthed, that perhaps some evidence would appear to confirm or debunk the claims. Others viewed the matter as another example of sensational rumor, destined to fade with time. But for the present, the revelations had thrust personal allegations into the political sphere in a way that demanded attention. People clashed over the significance, with some perceiving it as part of a crucial moral reckoning, and others seeing it as tabloid-like scandal-mongering that distracted from real issues. While many found O'Donnell's remarks provocative, few could deny their cultural impact. By aiming her accusations so directly at the president's marriage, she capitalized on a particular hunger for personal drama in public life. This was not a conversation about state secrets or official misconduct. It was something more intimate, more visceral, and in some respects more relatable to the general population. Whether that made it valid political discourse or sensationalized gossip remained in the eye of the beholder. Yet it dominated headlines, social networks, and water cooler conversations alike, underscoring the reality that nothing captures collective attention more than a personal narrative, featuring betrayal and heartbreak at the highest levels of power. The entire situation served as a reminder of how old feuds can evolve in unpredictable ways once the dynamics shift. When Trump was a private citizen or reality television figure, his skirmishes with a celebrity comedian seemed almost quaint, if caustic. But with the presidency in the mix, the stakes multiplied exponentially. O'Donnell's comedic persona morphed into that of a quasi-whistleblower, delivering scathing accusations that seemed to confirm every suspicion his critics held about him. In turn, those sympathetic to Trump's position saw it as the ultimate betrayal, with O'Donnell leveraging her cultural cachet to deliver a low blow against the new first family. That polarization meant the discourse was rarely calm or measured. Instead, it unfolded in extremes, befitting the intense media environment of modern times. Long after that explosive talk show appearance, media outlets continued to revisit what had happened. From national newspapers to gossip magazines, the speculation fed off itself. Pundits recounted the timeline of events, how Rosie O'Donnell had stepped onto the stage, launched into her statement, and effectively transformed the conversation about the new president's personal life. Although some insisted that the matter was irrelevant to governance, the story held a stubborn grip on the public's imagination. The conflict between a brazen critic and a president known for his own brand of aggressive rhetoric was inherently compelling. Combining that with the notion of a fractured marriage was almost guaranteed to command attention, generating ongoing debate about what it all meant for the Trump administration's capacity to hold public trust. For those who followed the saga closely, the emotional undertones were as significant as the explicit accusations. This wasn't just about policy or even typical political scandal. It was about the genuine possibility that a marriage, already stretched by the weight of public scrutiny, could be teetering on the edge of collapse. The First Lady's potential feelings of betrayal or alienation resonated with observers on a human level. Some empathized with her position, imagining the difficulty of going through a personal crisis in front of an entire nation. Others judged her for staying, if that was indeed her choice, amid swirling accusations. The story took on a life of its own, morphing into a dramatic narrative with a cast of characters that included the outspoken adversary, the embattled president, and the poised but mysterious spouse. The public found itself drawn into a drama that for many felt stranger than fiction. The sheer scale of the conversation illustrated how one individual's words, especially when delivered via mass media, can jolt the national psyche. Rosie O'Donnell, already well known for her comedic talents and outspoken personality, had propelled herself into a more controversial spotlight. For a brief period, it seemed as though the standard political commentary had stepped aside to allow a singular story about love, betrayal, and public figures to take center stage. Audiences were left to make sense of a swirl of unverified allegations, contradictory takes, and heated emotional responses. The lines between entertainment and politics became more blurred than ever, marking another chapter in a rapidly evolving cultural landscape where these arenas intersected on a daily basis. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Rosie's claims? Do you think Trump's marriage will survive? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.